folks, I'm sure you're wondering why I would tease a review of Thief and not review it. Well, let me tell you a tale about Windows XP and pre-Windows XP games. See, when Windows puts out a new operating system, not everything that worked with the old version will work with the new version. The reasons for this are many and varied, but a lot of the time it has to do with software code just not working with new, more advanced systems.
It's not stupid, it's advanced!
A lot of DOS games stopped working when Windows 95 came out, and some older games stopped working with the release of Windows XP, Thief being one of them. I managed to get it running for about 20 minutes, then it would just freeze up every time I tried to continue. If you want to try it yourself, here's what I recommend. Visit the Through the Looking Glass forums. These guys have been holding a torch for the fallen Looking Glass studios for ages now, and in their Thief forum they have an entire FAQ devoted to all kinds of problems you may encounter with this game, from getting it to run to just installing it. So, since that game's not gonna work, let's take a look at another kind of crime simulator. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. If you own a TV, a computer, or another game console, chances are you've already heard about the Grand Theft Auto series. From Rockstar Studios, what started out as a top-down 2D game exploded in popularity with the full 3D graphics of Grand Theft Auto 3, and its two spin-off titles, Vice City and San Andreas. All of the games share similar aspects. An open-world sandbox style of gameplay where the player can drive around, stealing cars, shooting or running down anything in their path until the cops catch and kill them. Oh, there's usually a story or something in there. Now, I played this back when it first came out for the PlayStation 2, but I picked it up recently during a Steam sale, so I'm curious to see how it's holding up on the PC. So the player takes the role of Carl Johnson, a former member of a suburban gang, returning to his old haunt to attend the funeral of his mother, and okay, did the game always look this bad? Sorry, I gotta stop and address the graphics before I can continue. I've got them turned up as high as they go, but they just look awful. The overall game world looks decent, but the characters are blocky and ugly, not helped by the lack of proper lighting and shading. And what is wrong with those trees? I know they're 2D, but why do they have glowing transparent edging? But I've always maintained that good graphics don't make a good game, so I'll let it go, but it really is distracting at times. So CJ is quickly roped back into the thug life by his brother and friends, who are all that's left of the Grove Street gang. CJ is also harassed into performing crimes by the corrupt officers Samuel Jackson and Chris Penn, who plant evidence to link him to a shooting and use it as blackmail material. Despite his protests, CJ has to drive his friends around on missions, spray painting over gang tags, theft, murder, and stealing from the National Guard. You know, the usual everyday crimes. This part of the game is mostly a tutorial for later acts, teaching you how to drive, ride bicycles, motorcycles, and getting you used to the combat system. Gradually the game opens up and lets you do more things, but it's a very slow process. The rest of the world is cut off from exploration for arbitrary reasons until the plot says it's okay to proceed, so the sense of freedom is limited at the start. You can find the gun stores fairly easily, but the game won't let you buy anything from them until it unlocks them in the story. But if there's one thing that Rockstar does well, it's sandbox games, and once the world opens up, it's a ton of fun. The player has the freedom to steal all manner of vehicles and drive them around the cityscape. A lot of the non-story content are mini-games like gambling, shooting range challenges, races, and more, plus some exploration rewards. After doing a story mission and saving the game, you're encouraged to just go out and create your own fun, like seeing how high you can get your wanted level before the police catch you, or find some tall things to ride a motorcycle off of. What really sets San Andreas apart from other Grand Theft Auto games is its stat system. The player has several basic stats like stamina, muscle, fat, and respect that determine what the player can do and how well they do it. Although stamina means you can't run or jump as far. Respect lets you recruit gang members as backup, though you probably won't want to. And muscle increases your hand-to-hand combat damage. The muscle and fat stats also affect Carl's physical appearance. There are also skills for each type of vehicle and weapon in the game, which you can increase by just using them. Though the driving stat increases so slowly you'll probably forget you even have one. Eventually the gang starts getting its strength back, CJ starts making new friends, and then the game throws you a curveball. Two of CJ's friends are working with the corrupt cops, CJ's brother is framed and sent to prison, and CJ himself is dumped in the middle of nowhere outside the city. Now this would be a really awesome story twist if it weren't for two things. Up until this point, the game has had you building up a power base in Los Santos by acquiring territory and taking out rival gangs. All that progress is stripped away and your weapon inventory is removed after the twist, pretty much setting you back to square one. If you didn't know the twist was coming, you're probably going to feel cheated. Also, up until this point, you've been working for the two characters who betray you, and one of them is incredibly annoying.
You still a buster to me.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, homie.
Man, are you a buster? Buster. Straight buster. Buster.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Did I hear something? Sound like the buster complaining again.
Man, this is childish.
Don't you just love when games make you do stuff for a character you hate and then reward your loyalty by making that character turn against you? The game's story is pretty good overall, with some good bits of dialogue and amusing characters, but they are very few and far between. Most NPCs and minor characters fall under one of three classifications. Crazy.
Hey,
Tiny bald idiota!
Catalina. Hey, I know it's you. What's eating you, baby?
I don't love you no more!
Stupid.
Give up the money. This a raid.
Ryder, not this again.
It ain't me, fool.
And annoying.
Hey, it's OG Loc, homie.
And if they're not one of the above, they're usually just a lazy stereotype. Some of the better characters include the Truth, a hippie conspiracy theorist invaluable in getting you back on your feet in the city of San Fierro.
What's with all aluminum foil, man?
Protection from mind control, dude.
Mind control.
Induction of images, sound, or emotion using microwave radiation. Do you know how many government satellites are watching any citizen at any moment?
No.
23. Do you know how many religious relics are kept at the Pentagon?
No, I don't.
23. You see a pattern emerging here, man?
Woozy, a respectable and civilized triad leader who aids you in shutting down your enemy's drug ring.
I have a confession to make. I'm blind.
No shit.
And Torino, a government spook who blackmails you into working for him, but returns the favor by getting your brother released for the game's third act. Oh, and while on the subject of the characters, let me say that I love the voice cast for this game. I already mentioned Sam Jack and Chris Penn as Tenpenny and Pulaski, but they're not the only celebrities lending their voices. A number of noted rappers like Ice-T in the game are credited, Peter Fonda plays the Truth, and James Woods does an amazing job as Torino.
I got double agents in Panama. I want to put a price on your head. A Russian spy, little fat Boris-looking guy. He's asking for clearance to interrogate you. Russian style. Calipers on the genitals. Feels good. You'd like it.
Some of the radio personalities include Will Wheaton, George Clinton, Axl Rose, and Andy Dick. Okay, that last one's not so great. And speaking of the radio, something else I love is that Rockstar licenses the use of dozens of songs to plant into the game soundtrack, playable via the in-game radio stations. Besides the downright funny talk show station, you've got a breadth of early 90s music to listen to, from rock to reggae to rap to country and even some early electronica. Admittedly, there are only a few songs out of all of them I can actually stand, but one advantage the PC version has is that you can import your own music and play it on a custom radio station. So that's a lot of praise for the game so far, and while I do consider it one of the best examples of a sandbox world game, it has a lot of pacing and difficulty issues. One issue that stems from the PC version is the control scheme. San Andreas was designed with a PlayStation 2 controller in mind, and the transfer to the PC keyboard is less than stellar. Enter is often used as the no or cancel button, which seems counterintuitive. Driving the car with keys isn't impossible, but there is a learning curve, though I actually found it easier to drive the bikes and motorcycles with keys than with the controller. The same can't be said for flying, however. Learning to fly a plane or helicopter with the required precision and accuracy is hair-pullingly frustrating, but I'll rant on that in a bit. Also, as a console port, you can only save the game at save points, which you can unlock by purchasing property around the game world. This is a nice system, but it's a real pain in the beginning of the game when you don't have the money to buy a new save point and have to spend a lot of time traveling back to your house on the other side of the city. While I like the Sims-esque stats system, it can be annoying. The game will block your progress in the story if you don't have the prerequisite skill level for the mission. At one point I had to waste half an hour practicing my swimming and diving skills just because the game said it wasn't high enough for the next mission. This was also how I discovered a really bad bug in the game. If you have the frame limiter option turned off under the graphics settings, it doesn't let you dive for some reason. Turning it back on reduces your maximum frame rate but allows you to dive again. A lot of the story missions are awesome, but the good ones are spaced out between long stretches of hard missions. A lot of the time they're combat-oriented, so it's advisable to stock up on ammo and body armor before a new mission. A lot of the best ones involve some kind of car chase, but there are a lot of unique combat missions, such as when you defend Zero's transmitter from attacking RC planes with a mounted machine gun. The best one is the culmination of an entire series of side quests where CJ, Woozy, and their allies rob a casino. The monetary payoff isn't great, but it's worth it for the spectacle. The bad missions usually involve long stretches of driving before being put in a life or death situation, easy to fail driving or flying stunts, or completing a stupid minigame. Also, be prepared for more than a few racing missions. And even though I love James Woods' character and he opens up some of the fun missions that ultimately lead to you getting a freaking jetpack, he also gives you some of the hardest missions in the game. It starts when he outright lies to you.
Now listen, I need you to buy me some property, okay? Shouldn't cost that much. You offer them $1. If they give you a hard time, kill them.
It's not $1, it's 80 grand. No negotiation at all. I didn't have that money, so the game came to a screeching halt while I went around mugging drug dealers and doing taxi jobs to raise the money. Eventually I discovered the game had quietly unlocked Las Venturas, the game's Vegas stand-in, and hit the blackjack tables at the casino until I had more money than I knew what to do with. So I went back, bought the damn airstrip, and made another discovery. Now James Woods tells me I need to learn to fly. This is where I hit another progress wall and had to spend several hours trying to master the terrible flying controls and then completing the actual flying missions. The AI in the game is also very subpar for its time. Pedestrian drivers barely pay attention to the road beyond red lights, often changing lanes without looking or just getting into traffic accidents without your help. And the game makes a feature out of recruiting friendly gang members when they barely do anything in the middle of a firefight. They're more likely to get in your way and die. The game's overall story is decent, but it feels slow and inconsistent in its themes. Act 1 seems to focus on CJ and his attempts to win back his brother's respect, which mostly involves him killing rival gangs of crack dealers. When he's not playing chauffeur for his friends, CJ is constantly complaining that this kind of activity is why he left the gang 5 years ago. Act 2, after the betrayal twist, finds CJ separated from his brother and only has his sister and Carlos to rely on to get back on his feet. He manages to make new friends, start a couple of legitimate businesses in San Fierro, and by the end of it is living in a mansion as a music producer. In the final act, Torino rewards Carl's loyalty by freeing his brother, who does nothing but complain about CJ's success and how he's not a gangster anymore. And ultimately, CJ has to become a murderous gangster again in order to redeem himself in his brother's eyes and get his revenge on Tenpenny. I don't know, it seems like Rockstar is trying to say something with this story, but I can't figure it out. I guess the chief message is that crack is bad, but it's hard to push that kind of message when you back it up with theft, murder, and general mayhem. This is usually the part where I talk about mods that expand a game's replay value when available. Unfortunately, if we're going to talk about mods for this game, we need to go over the hot coffee controversy. Let me put on my serious suit for this. Let's begin. Now what happened was, Rockstar originally considered putting a sex minigame into San Andreas to accompany the girlfriend dating scenes. While they got far enough with this idea that it made it into the game code, someone higher up in the company chain finally realized this was a terrible, terrible idea. Video games have already suffered enough attacks from conservative knee-jerk think of the children groups over perceived sex, sexism, and violence. The last thing they needed was ammunition like this. I think the decision not to include it was made mostly to keep the game's rating at M for mature, since there are almost no retailers who will stock an adult-rated title. So the sex minigame was removed, but not in the way they should have. What they actually did was remove code from the game that triggered the sex minigame to happen. It was still there in the game, but there was no way the game would play it. And then came the infamous hot coffee mod. Some clever modders started poking around the game's code, discovered the sex minigame, and created a mod patch that restored the linking code, returning it to the normal game. Conservative groups found out, Fox News and other cable outlets started covering the story, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was reclassified as an adult title, thus getting it pulled from store shelves, but not before it had already sold a metric shit ton of copies. Now, here's where things get complicated. Now, it is true that the sex game was in every copy of San Andreas. That is fact. But there was no way one could pick up a copy, play the game from start to finish, 100% completion, and actually find it. In order to get to the sex game, the owner had to make the conscious act to acquire the mod and apply it to the game. So this really falls under user-made content. I've seen far more racy and explicit sex mods for other games, but these weren't given adult ratings because the user was the one who had to add it to the game. Now you're probably wondering why Rockstar got all this flack for something they didn't really do. Well, they were a major AAA title-making game studio that already had a history of violent games under their belt, so that didn't help matters. But really, Rockstar shot themselves in the foot on this topic. If they had just come out at the start and explained how it was the user's choice to activate hot coffee and the average user would never see it, they could have deflected a lot of criticism. Instead, they basically hid from the press and refused to address the issue. When they did come out of hiding, they claimed that the entire minigame wasn't their creation. It was made by the hackers responsible for the mod. This, of course, was not true. They made the game, and it was easily proven to exist in a regular store copy's code. This was an infantile move, and it just made them look like bigger sleazeballs. Now, as for the less controversial mods, there's a ton. New vehicles, weapons, and clothing are the most common, but a lot of the mods I found are more like permanent cheats, unlocking the entire game world at the start, altering the vehicle and flight handling, full stats and skills, and more. A lot of them require you to start the game over from the beginning, so I didn't get to try many of them, since I already put in over 40 hours replaying this game for this review. Speaking of which, replay feels a bit limited once you've cleared the game. A lot of the unique fun in the game comes from the story missions, but you can't replay them after completion. This means you only get one opportunity to play the more unique and memorable levels. A lot of San Andreas mod sites host save file packs so you can return to your favorite missions, but it won't be your game or your character that you're playing. So that's Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. While it can be slow, aggravating, and thematically confusing at times, it's still one of the best and funniest sandbox games I've ever played. I even prefer it over the sequel, Grand Theft Auto 4, but I'll go over that another time. I recommend picking this up for anyone who wants to get an idea of what the Grand Theft Auto games are about, or sandbox games in general. I wouldn't call it intelligent or mature, but it's still fun, and in the end, that's what matters. That is, until you crash your plane into a hill for the 10th time.
Stop that dang varmint!